So I've realized at this point that there are a couple more things that I have to share in the efforts of telling an honest and also linear story so that there's no surprises. Again, you'll see what I'm referring to. But when Peter and I had discussed marriage in the first the first round, I made it very clear that I would. Well, I asked him flat out. I said, "Would you sign a prenup?" And he said, did not skip a beat. He said 100%. The only time that that changed was when we discussed having kids, and in his opinion kind of was, well, I don't want to be stuck raising our family and then be at risk at you leaving us. And then my response and idea about that was like, I almost think that the prenup is more to protect the children in that instance. But I have a business that I've built completely aside, and I should say, sometimes in spite of this relationship. And I'm not sure, I don't understand what any of that has to do with a potential legal union between us. So he knew that I intended on that there's no way that I would have gotten married without having a prenup. I'm just going to throw that out there, okay? Number one. Number two, I have talked about this, but Peter had a thing about starting fights in public, or at least continuing them, whatever you want to call it. Um, I'm of the opinion that, can we talk about this behind closed doors? And he's like, no, we're going to do it right now. And so I would get so frustrated because I don't want to cause a scene in public, and then I didn't realize until too late that these were not good faith arguments, if you will, that he got off on seeing how worked up he could get me until I stormed away. And then here's the deal. We had an agreement that I wasn't going to storm off anymore, that I wouldn't get pissed off and storm off. So it was very like, I realize when I describe that how stupid it makes me sound, but I think I've already said this, but in the end, because of the way that he ended things, I got my way. You know why? Because it wasn't because of me. And I'll probably say this again, but for the record, I feel, and I still feel to this day, that any issue that we had, none of it was a deal breaker. We could have worked through anything that we had experienced in our relationship. There was no physical violence. There was no cheating. It takes two to tango. And unfortunately, one person can't hold up the majority of the relationship. But so anyway, I mention all of this to say that I begrudgingly accepted the open, or proposed and I don't know. I hesitate again to say executed, because it's like, I didn't want this. I did not want this, but I was driving myself crazy trying to get affection out of somebody who got off on not showing, on restricting me and withholding affection from me. That's what it was. So one night, Peter and I were in the Castro, which is the neighborhood here in San Francisco, out having fun, right? And again, we had just made our open relationship a thing. we also had the agreement that we weren't going to talk about it. We weren't going to tell people about it. I didn't want this. And I sure as hell didn't want any of our friends knowing about it. So we were at a taqueria afterwards, right? So just getting food for the walk home. And this guy comes up to us in line. I think, so what happened was I had gone to the bathroom. Peter was in line ordering his, like, our stuff had already been ordered or whatever. It was just like waiting. And then this guy, like, as I'm coming out of the bathroom, the guy like kind of looks at him and he starts talking to Peter, and he asks Peter like, "Oh, is this your boyfriend?" Pointing at me. And then Peter says, "Yes." And then he goes, "Well," and then again, giving me the elevator eyes, like once again, he's like, "Are y'all open?" And then Peter said again, "Yes." My heart dropped. I saw red and I like kept it together for us to get our stuff, but we left out of there. I do not remember even acknowledging this man, but I was furious. I was absolutely furious with Peter for telling this stranger that we had an open relationship. It was none of this fucker's business. I don't know why the fuck, like, why? So Peter said that he was upset, and he kind of said this kind of jokingly. He was like, "Well, I was kind of offended that, you know, he wasn't into both of us." And I was just so enraged by the fact that this stranger, this scrub off the street, had like intimate knowledge about our relationship. And so what I did was I got so upset that I stormed off, and then I realized our promise, and I came back to get him. And then we walked the rest of the way home. I honestly don't remember the rest of the evening, but I was so pissed off and so enraged about that. So the next morning, we go to get coffee. And I remember we're having our coffee. We're having our coffee at Dubose Park, which has a very special place to me because that's where I learned how to talk to dogs. By my neighbor when I was 14, 15. And we're having our coffee, just trying to have a peaceful, I believe it was a Sunday morning. And Peter brings up the night before. And I asked him, I said, "Can we please talk about this a little bit later?" And he's like, "No, I want to talk about this now." In the middle of the park, with a bunch of fucking people around us, he picks a fight with me. I notice that people are staring. I honestly don't remember if I stormed off. I think I probably did, but I got back. He wasn't there. I left, and then I start getting all these calls from him. And it was just the most stupid, like, can't I just fucking sit here and enjoy my goddamn coffee for fuck's sake? Again, it doesn't fucking matter about the coffee that I fucking bought for us. And can't you wait 5 minutes until we get back home and then we can talk about this? I was so pissed off by this. Like, when we got back home, I remember that he used it against me that I stormed off in the park. And I was like, dude, I felt like that was a fucking trap. And again, why the fuck are you telling strangers about intimate details about our relationship? I don't know that I was expecting or planning on sharing all of this, but here it is, and here it's out there. But I don't know a better way of how to describe or convey the energy that went into this trip that we had planned. There was definitely this sense that, like, okay, this is make or break. This trip is going to determine whether or not we're going to work together. So finally, I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to drag it out this long, but in the next video, I will tell you about Peter and I's trip to Monterey, the central coast of California. Yeah, tell you how that went.